Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Fighter Heart podcast. I'm here with James Smith today. He's going to share his Fighter Heart story. Thanks for being on, James.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
So if you want to start off, just give us. We like to go right into it. Just give us a little bit of your background, who you are, where you live, a little bit of your upbringing if you can, and then getting right into your Fighter Heart story.
No problem. Yeah. My name's James. I'm from the south coast of England. I'm 38, nearly 39. I'm a married dad of three, and I've been married for, God, just nearly 20 years. I've done my dues. And I used to be a barber by trade, but unfortunately had to give that up due to a condition I was diagnosed with 2 years ago, called motor neuron disease. Now, for anyone listening in America, you would probably know that as ALS. I've been basically dealing with motor neuron disease, and what I've been diagnosed with is ALS, which is a form of motor neuron disease. For when I've had symptoms for about 4 years, and I was officially diagnosed 2 years ago. And luckily, well, I say luckily, in comparison to a lot of others, I was diagnosed with a relatively slow progressive version, and I've tried to use that to my advantage and share my journey with as many people as possible to try and help anyone else going through the same thing, and utilize my time wisely to raise much needed awareness for the condition, across the world, hopefully, because it's um, very little is known about it. You may have. Do you know what ALS is yourself? I think you've muted yourself.
I did have myself on mute. All right. No, I was gonna.
I
I
was
was.
thinking
I
I was
actually.
thinking, oh my god, my internet's gone again, and I could see your mouth move. I was like, I can't hear him, I can't hear him. And then I saw in the little left hand corner, it's got
Yeah.
Joe's muted himself. Go on,
Good.
start again.
I had a whole good question. So I was gonna mention that actually. I was gonna say I've heard of ALS obviously from the ALS challenge, the ice bucket challenge from years ago, but I don't even know what it is or what it stands for. The letters. I don't know.
So yeah, I mean, I know it as MND, which is abbreviation of motor neuron disease.
Yeah.
And under the umbrella of motor neuron disease, you have different types, which ALS is one of the most common ones, and unfortunately one of the most severe ones. And ALS, do you know what? I can't remember what it stands for, but
I'll look it up.
um,
I want to look it up.
it's a type of neuron disease. We'll look it up. I think I know what it is, but for recording purposes, I don't want to try and sound like I can't pronounce it.
Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis.
That's the one.
oh,
So in a
oh, it's Lou
nutshell,
Gehrig's disease. Okay.
how yeah, yeah. So that was named after I think it was is he an American football player, I think.
He was a baseball
Um,
player for the
so
Yankees.
in a nutshell, how baseball player, there we go. There we go. I only know football and rugby here, so
Yeah, yeah.
um so unfortunately the way that ALS works is, the signal from your brain malfunctions and affects the nerves in the body to operate the muscles correctly, and over time those nerves degenerate, and that then consequently makes the muscles weaker and weaker and weaker and not usable.
Yeah. So
So
you said two
luckily,
years ago you were diagnosed?
yeah, yeah. So not to make it sound too sort of, you know negative, the average lifespan for someone with this condition is about 18 months after they get diagnosed. So some people can be affected quickly. Some people, like myself, have a very slow progressive version. Some people can start slow and then go fast. That's not so common from what I've heard, but yeah, it's either fast or slow. And the average lifespan since you get diagnosed is about 18 months to 2 years. By 5 years, most people would be in a pretty bad way. So having symptoms for myself for 4 years, I sort of count myself relatively lucky. And 2 years on, nothing else in apart from my arms and my hands have been affected so far. So that was my sort of bucket list thing to do, and try and spread the word of the disease as much as I can to try and find a cure, because there is no cure or actual treatment for this disease so far. It was only relatively it was only really on the news. I think this week the FDA had a meeting to try and sort of invite people to get their decision to approve something called Neurone, which is a drug that they've trialed that's shown quite good promise in America, and unfortunately it didn't get approved. So yeah, it's just one of those battles that we all have to try and overcome.
Yeah, I mean, that's so. What you said there were warning signs, right? Before, what are those symptoms?
Yeah, so my first ever symptom, and this is pretty common from everyone I've spoken to, is I'd say 90% of people will experience what's called twitching of the muscle. So imagine you do you ever get one of those eye twitches when you're tired? You
Yeah,
ever get your bottom of your eye twitch? It's a bit like that, but in different parts of your body. Mine was in my left arm, bicep, tricep area. And I come home I was an avid runner, and I was doing sort of, 10 miles to 15, 16 miles, in a run. And I came home one day and showed my wife that my left arm was completely just firing. The bicep was twitching, almost like I had like one of those like electronic pads on there that was making it twitch. And I didn't think anything of it because I didn't have any other symptom other than twitching. And as time went on, I noticed, specifically while I was running, that arm started to feel more fatigued, and I couldn't sort of hold it up in the position that you run. So your arms are sort of like at a 90-degree angle when you run, aren't they? And that left arm kept sort of wanting to drop down vertically, if you know what I mean.
yeah.
So I was like, do you know what? I better call the doctor and see what's going on. And in the back of my mind, I thought the worst, because my grandmother had motor neuron disease, and so did her brother that I never met. He died unfortunately before I was born, and he too had motor neuron disease. So in the back of my mind, I was thinking, oh my God, is this, is it that? And so I went to the doctors and they did a test to on my blood, and that had a level of something in that to get the doctor to refer me to a neurologist, who then proceeded to do tests and diagnose me, unfortunately. And as time has gone on, it is slowly progressed, and the twitching has almost stopped, and it then moves to the next part of my body. So where it started in my left arm, the twitching is pretty much stopped in that arm now, but the weakness has then progressed to almost where I'm basically unable to use it from day-to-day things, typing an email, holding a phone up to my ear, grabbing a glass of wine and drinking it type thing. And then the twitching has now moved over to my right arm, and the same process is happening. But the problem is with this condition is everyone is so different. You could probably speak to 100 people with this disease, and each one of them will probably have a different story to tell you on how they started and how it's progressed, and where it started. It's just a minefield, and I can understand why it's so difficult to find a treatment or a cure to help, really.
When So, what can you walk us through, like, when you were diagnosed? Like, did you already have a feeling because of, your family history?
It was always in the back of my mind, but due to how little I was progressing in those 2 years before I got diagnosed, I was hoping, and so was the doctor, I was hoping it was going to be something called benign fasciculation syndrome, which you can get, and it's not harmful. You just get, your body just malfunctions and it just twitches in different areas. But after they did what's called an EMG test, which is basically like they stick little electric pads all over you, make your muscles fire, and test the signal. And then they also, it sounds a bit horrible, but they also stick like a tiny little needle, probably about that big, into the surface of the skin. And then it's got like a little microphone on the end of it. And they measure what your muscles sound like, basically, and see if there's any malfunctioning signal that goes through it. So they did two of those tests, and that was over COVID, believe it or not. So I had to wait before, after my first test to my second EMG test, um, throughout the whole of COVID. So I had lockdown to deal with, having this in the back of my mind while trying to entertain my kids and drinking way too much, as everyone probably did in COVID times. And after that happened, the second EMG test come back with enough information for the doctor to say, look, I think it's MND, unfortunately. I'm going to refer you to an MND specialist. So up until that point, I was only dealing with a sort of general neurologist who would deal with a large spectrum of people in that field. And then they forwarded me on to a specialist who ironically was the same doctor that my grandmother was dealing with and looked after while she had it. He basically agreed with the first neurologist. He offered me to do more tests, but he said, look, I'm very confident that it is what we think it is. But what I would like to offer you is to go and see not only a MND specialist, but a professor of neurology in what we call a university hospital, which was about a 3-hour drive away from where I live, just on the outskirts of London, in a place called Oxford. And he was a professor of neurology, and he's at the top of his game. If he was going to diagnose me, he was the one to do it. And it was him that actually officially diagnosed me after being seen by him after about half an hour. And he was like, I'm really sorry to say that I think it's MND, and it's ALS, which is a form of MND, and we're going to class this as limb onset. So it started in your limbs, where some people can start in their voice. They can suddenly sound drunk or slurred. Some people start with their feet. There's a famous guy here in the UK. Actually, is he from the UK? I don't know. Stephen Hawkins. You
Oh
heard of
yeah,
Stephen Hawkins?
yeah.
Yeah. So he had ALS, and he started with his feet, and then it went to his voice, and somehow he lasted, I think, 50 years with it, which is unbelievable. So I was diagnosed with limb onset ALS, and I asked the question when I was at the appointment. My wife was in tears next to me. She was heavily pregnant with our third child at the time, and I said, "Look, how long have I got?" And he said, looking at your statistics, and you're relatively fit, um, you know, you are above average on terms of life expectancy and in comparison to a lot of others. He said, normally if it starts slow, it will carry on slow. And we're looking at potentially 10 years, if not decades. So, it's still not a long time, but it's a lot longer than the 18 months to 2 years that most people get. And so I count myself relatively lucky with that. And a little glimmer of hope. He, in his line of work, he deals with a lot of scientists with trying to find cures for diseases like MND, and he feels that in that time frame that I will hopefully receive treatment or even a drug to help cure it in that sort of 10-year to decades estimate that he's given me. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was tough. It was tough to hear, and it took me a long time to come to terms with it. And it's only really in the last sort of 18 months that I have. It's sort of a good six months to a year. It sort of, I tried to forget what I had, but doing things like this, talking to people like yourself, spreading the word. You know, I do my own podcast. I do little videos on social media, and it's almost like a bit of therapy for me, I think, and getting feedback from people that are going through this as well, or even people that are looking after their loved ones with the disease. It just, yeah, it makes me want to do it more and more. So it's almost, like I said, it's just like a bit of therapy, to be fair, and
That's
it's
awesome.
oddly satisfying.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. How has your life changed, both in your day-to-day life and mind state since you were diagnosed?
Mind state is probably the easiest one to describe. At the beginning, I tried to block it out and probably went down a little bit of a rabbit hole. Now, if anyone's listening to this and knows me, I do like a bit of a drink, and I took that a little bit to the extreme. Uh, a, because COVID happened and it become a habit, and B, it was almost like, what else am I going to do now? I might as well have another drink, and it sort of snowballed a little bit too much, where I had to sort of rein it in slightly to help mentally, because it wasn't really helping. It was the wrong thing to do. And after clearing my mind and focusing on something that I could do to help, it it helped me much more than trying to block it out. If I was, talking about it and sort of helping raise awareness, helps me more than it is to try and block out what, the unfortunate disease is. Physically wise, it affected me obviously in my work. Now, when lockdown happened, I had a complete career change, and having MND in the back of my mind made me realize that you do only live once, and if you want to do something, just do it. And I retrained after about 10 years on and off I was basically a car salesman, and spent 10 years in there. Absolutely hated it, but it paid the bills. We had a family to provide for. And after being basically made redundant, I decided I'd retrain and become a barber, and it was the best thing I ever did. I loved that job. It was
What?
awesome. I wish I did it the 10 years ago that I thought, do you know what? I'd love to be a barber. And I didn't do it then, and I wish I did it. So I retrained over lockdown, managed to smash out a 12-month intensive barbering course to get a qualification so I could work in a shop in about 6 months. I obviously had a knack for it and picked it up fairly quickly, and I basically went straight into a job working in a barber shop. And over time, I knew what was coming, and the people that I worked for were absolutely amazing. They understood my situation. They adapted, my working hours to suit my, degenerative nature of this condition. And obviously, being a barber, you can't really cut hair with your feet. So I had to use my hands and my arms. And over time, when my hands and arms were getting weaker, I had to then drop, certain days and how many clients I could cut in a day. And it got to the point where I was like, actually, this is becoming quite dangerous. And I had to hang up the clippers and call it a day. Not forever. I'm feeling hopeful that I'll get back into it at one stage of my life. But physically wise, it's not as hard. I can adapt the physical changes at the moment. And if anyone with ALS is listening, may disagree because they might have a slightly different way that their condition is affecting them. But I'm able to adapt in certain ways to get on with life. The hardest thing for me is I've got 3 kids that I used to do the whole dad thing. I don't know if you've got kids, but you throw them up in the air and catch them, or you wrestle with them. And I've got two boys that are like Duracell bunnies. They just don't stop. And it's difficult for me not to do certain things with them that I probably could have done 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's finding a balancing act to deal with it, really. And I think I've found a way to deal with it, and that's just talking about the condition and
Yeah.
hearing other people's stories and sharing mine. That's more helpful than drinking a bottle of wine a night.
So when did you start the podcast? Where you started, spreading awareness?
Very recently, I've just, you know what, a funny story. I just tried to record my 5th episode this afternoon, about 6 hours ago, and I got 25 minutes into the recording, and I made a couple of mistakes. And I was like, oh, do you know what? I'll go back and record it. And I went into my software that I'm recording, and I hadn't clicked record, so I spent 25 minutes just talking to myself. So it's in its infancy stage at the moment. I mainly do solo podcasts. I've had one guest on so far, but over the last, I think it's maybe 3 months that I've been running it. And in that time, I've done a complete house renovation to adapt it for my future needs. So obviously, I haven't been able to concentrate on it too much, but it's awesome. I love doing it. It's really good. I love tinkering around with the microphone and making it sound really, really cool. Everyone thinks I should be on the radio, apparently.
I mean, you're using one of the most famous radio mics ever, so why not?
Apparently so. I'm a big Michael Jackson fan, and apparently this is the same mic he used for recording his Thriller album. Apparently,
Yeah, that's why I
yeah,
was so surprised
I'm
you told me they made a new one. That's like the best mic, so they haven't made a new one in so long.
yeah, they've got a new one now, which yeah, I like this one. It's fine.
Good, good, good. So so right now, your day to day, what does it look like?
So I had to give up, obviously, barbering about just over 12 months ago. I am a very proud stay-at-home dad. My wife she runs her own business, which I'm sat in right now. I don't know if you can see on the camera those shelves,
Yep.
right? That is full of basically candy sweets, and she runs her own sweet business and makes bespoke gifts and things like that. So I am doing my own thing at the moment, where I'm doing my podcast. I'm trying to, raise the awareness and be a stay-at-home dad, so my wife can carry on working. And it's hard. It's hard. I think I'd much rather go and work 10 hours a day somewhere else, because being a dad, you know, and looking after the kids and things, and it's not that I can't. It's not that I'm doing everything either. I'm not. I'm unable to do things like
Yeah.
putting plates away in the kitchen cupboards and things like that. So, it falls on my wife quite a lot. But that's what I do. I'm a stay-at-home dad at the moment, but I will go
Hey,
back to being a barber at one stage, sure.
that's a big job though. Stay-at-home dad for 3 kids is a lot, and
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
very.
Luckily, two of them are at school, so I've got a little bit of time in the day. But
Yeah. So what is some advice you would give to someone, who's in a similar situation as you, around the same age, and they just got the news, like what is some words of wisdom you could give?
if you want to do something, just do it. I've got a thing that I learned from a friend of mine that is going through this as well, that's been really helpful and supportive, is um not today MND. So every day I wake up and go, no, it's not going to be today that it's going to bring me down. I'll just crack on and do what I want to do for that day, however it might be. And I think if you focus on being as positive as you can be, mentally wise, that's going to help you physically as well. So try, it's easier said than done, and we've all been there, but having a positive mindset, I think, is probably the most powerful thing that you can probably teach yourself in life and dealing with things like a terminal illness. So yeah, a positive outlook on anything, and don't dwell on things. Try not to let things stress you out too much. Say la vie. It's one of those. It's I think if you are open-minded and positive, then you'll be in a much better place than you would be if you were dwelling on everything and feeling sort of negative, because that's going to affect you in so many different ways.
Have like a stoic outlook, you'd say?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely. Yeah, that's a much better way of putting it. I just waffled on for about 30 seconds to say that exact thing.
Hey, they knew what they were talking about, you know.
Yeah, exactly. That's why you're doing this, and I'm still only on episode 5.
You have a way better mic. I don't even have a mic.
Thing is, I got all the gear and no idea. We need to team up.
Yeah, send me the mic on weekends. We'll send it back and forth.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Well, James, is there anything else you didn't, say? Is there anything? Oh, tell us what your podcast is, by the way. So, like, I know you're going to stick to it, so we want to hear it.
Awesome. Yeah. Oh, amazing. Yeah. So I've trying to create like a bit of a, not a brand, I suppose, but everything that I do is comes under Beyond MND. So the word beyond, so just trying to look beyond everything. And it's just, yeah, that's what it's called. So if you search for Beyond MND on any podcast platform, if you want to follow me on social media, I spam the world with what I do every day, and it's the same name, Beyond MND. So and you feel free to follow me if you want.
Yeah, totally, definitely will. Awesome. Well, I guess if there's anything else you want to say, anything you want to share that you didn't share.
No, I think we've covered a lot of it. What do you think? Do you think we've done good, or have we missed out anything?
No, it's a half hour flew by. So
It has, hasn't it? Wow, it has.
whenever it goes by that quick, it was definitely a good time. All right, cool. So I guess that's it for now. Thank you so much, James Smith, for coming on. Everyone else, thanks for listening to the Fighter Heart podcast. We'll see you next week.